So thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Nick Brown. I'm the network data scientist in PermafrostNet, and some of the things I work on, include making supporting the network HQP and partners to make the generation and the use of data and the publication of data easier and more accessible, both within the network and hopefully outside of the network. And I'll touch on a little bit on a few events that we've had to kind of facilitate the conversation about what those needs are, and some of the actions we've taken since those events to try and put some of those things in motion. We have a little activity, a short activity first, because data in a way is kind of data and knowledge are sort of the glue, I guess, that you could think of holding the different themes together. And one of the ways that I think it's good to highlight this is by getting people in individual themes to think a little bit about how their theme is connected to the other themes, and also to groups outside the network, but in terms of the data that's being generated, and the data that they're using, because ultimately it's not just one's own project that can use that data. And then towards the end, the aim of the discussion is to have a bit more of a dialogue, so I can hear back from you the things that I've presented, what works, what is going to be valuable for you, what needs to change, and what's missing, what haven't I mentioned that maybe is important. So I'll go back to this slide that is in the proposal and just kind of reiterate how the knowledge and data products really glue the different themes together, and outputs from one theme are inputs to another theme, and all of the data products that the network generates need to be made available, not strictly for the network, but for the broader community who is interested in permafrost data. And in developing this session, I kind of had the idea of a metaphor of a rideshare board. So, if you need to get a lift to Montreal, maybe you'll put up a thing, I'm really looking to get to Montreal, and someone else might see that and think, oh, I'm going to Montreal. So it's the same kind of in the network with data. So I'd like everyone, and whether you're in a theme or not, you can adapt it, but I'd like for people to think about sort of two questions. Over the next year, what data will you need for your particular research program or project? And also, what data might you generate that might be useful for someone else that you'd be willing to publish or willing to share? Because that's one of the ways the network can demonstrate value is by this kind of collaboration. And just take a moment, maybe a minute or so, and jot down some notes. And we have a mural board. Maybe the chat monitor can put it in the chat. But just to put this data rideshare board up and try and build some of those connections. And if as I say, if you're not in a theme, this maybe you're not producing data, but maybe there's something that you're interested in that you think the network might generate that you need for the next year in your own project. And this could be observations, model results, lab results. So maybe let's just take the next minute or so. And maybe take the next 10 or 15 seconds to finish up your thoughts. We'll leave this board up for the rest of today and through tomorrow as well. And so hopefully, if you have an idea that comes to you later on, just feel free to jot it down there, and we'll try and keep that up for as long as possible and try and make those connections. Great, so moving on. Okay. Moving on, so what are some of the events that we've held in the network for data? In May, we had the PermafrostNet Data Workshop. This was well attended. We had participants from Northern Canada, Southern Canada, international participants, and it included online surveys, breakout groups, and it really was trying to figure out what are the priorities for different user groups for permafrost data. And we now have the report available. The DOI link is in the slide here, and it's also available on our website. So if you're curious to see what the conclusions of that were, I'll mention a few of them here, but please do take the time to check out the report. You can it's also, you can find it on the website. Sort of as a follow-up to that event, we had a mini data hackathon in August that, as I mentioned, was informed by the data workshop and consisted of some group Q&A. It was designed to encourage and support data publication, as this was one of the sort of needs identified during the data workshop. And this had a pretty good reception, and it's likely that there'll be a similar event again this spring to try and encourage people who are part of the network to publish their data and support them in doing that. And also, you know, spending the day helping one another with the challenges that are associated with that kind of work. Just a few highlights that will inform some of the things I'm going to present to next about what some people said at the workshop. So as part of this data creation cycle, participants said, you know, I need tools to deal with sensor drift, damage to my instruments, outliers, and temperature time series data. After the data processing has taken place, you know, it's important to have a copy of that raw data and to outline what steps have taken place. This is important for traceability and for repeatability. On the sort of publication and data access side, people are interested in developing a web map of available permafrost data with the associated metadata, and having some sort of, you know, better standardization of that metadata so that it is easier to search. In the last talk, someone mentioned on papers, communities not being able to find information about their community. And so, you know, maybe one of the metadata elements for the data sets themselves also needs to be specific community names. So it's trying to bring that together a little bit more clearly. So starting from here, some of the things that I've been working on, and I want to take the time here to acknowledge Alex Gao as well, who's been working with me in developing some of these tools, as a way to deal with messy observational data. So when you download your data from the field, often there's sensor dropouts, there's the instruments have been pulled out, and there's sections of the data that aren't really usable or you know, have to be cleaned up. And there's sort of a spectrum of data that's physically impossible and can just be automatically removed, and data that's, you know, maybe requires a little bit more expert review, and having a totally automated tool isn't appropriate. So we've built a little open source tool to support ground temperature data handling, and you have raw temperature data, and then, you know, you can imagine that you have some sort of system where you identify data points that are suspicious, that might be a result of sensor error. You have some sort of expert assessment of whether or not those are actually data values that need to be removed, and then you can choose to, you know, delete them, change them to whatever your no data value is. And then coming out of this, you have clean data, but you also have a record of changes. And this was one of the things that people highlighted was important in the workshop, was having this record of, you know, what's happened to this data set. The other sort of key piece in this is that we wanted something that didn't require programming knowledge, because, you know, it's can be a barrier when a lot of the cleaning tools for this kind of data require a certain level of knowledge that maybe, you know, a master's student might not have coming into the program, or someone who's a field technician. So I'll just do a quick demo of this. This is still in the early stages, but it seems to be working well. So you can load a ground temperature data set and interactively investigate any sort of data anomalies. The first step that I mentioned is the identification of data that might be suspicious. So we have a series of filters that can be customized based on the kind of data you have. So let's say you want to identify any data that's above 10 degrees. You can do that, and then you're not automatically deleting all of those. You can then, as someone familiar with the site and familiar with the conditions at the site, interactively select data to either replace. So here you can replace it with -999 or with 0. Or delete it altogether if it's not appropriate. And then when you export it, right now we have, I'll mention this, it will export in the sort of standard format that's being used by the Northwest Territories Geological Survey. And it will also create a log, as I mentioned, that describes the changes that have been made to that data set. So if someone wants to go back, if you want to go back and redo it, you can see what's been changed. So similar to this, one of the big topics during the workshop was standardization of data and interoperability of data. And one of the kind of the main points, takeaways from some of the experts is that as much as possible when you're talking about standards and you're talking about trying to adopt these standards, you want to use what exists already as much as possible rather than duplicating things. And so within the network, we've decided as a starting point to support the Northwest Territories Geological Survey ground temperature template as kind of a baseline standard for ground temperature data. So they have a CSV or tabular format, and to support this, we've built a file checker. So on the, I don't know if I have the website. Yeah, so on the Permafrost Data Science platform, if you have one of these files and you want to see does it fit in with this NTGS template, you can check it there. It will do some basic checks and let you know if it fits into that standard template. We also have on the PDSP PermafrostNet Data Science Platform website an area where you can upload that data set to a data server if you're interested in sharing it with the network or with people outside the network. And again, talking about the metadata, I've been working with Ashley Rudy at the Northwest Territories Geological Survey to take the metadata that the NTGS has developed and try and map that to more widely used in the sort of national and international space metadata standards, so that when this data is published, it's easier to interoperate with other systems, so that the World Meteorological Organization or the Permafrost Information Network, these data sets can communicate a little bit more easily. As I mentioned, for publishing Permafrost data, we have a page on the PDSP website where if you have a data set that's in this particular format, you can upload it and it will be become visible. You can you know, it'll plot on a little map, and you can look at the data itself. One of the questions that came out of the data workshop in May was to what extent the network should be a data repository by ourselves, or should we outsource sort of some of the responsibilities of long-term storage of the data to organizations that have, you know, funding beyond 5 years and are more well set up to do that. So at the moment, there's sort of 2 steps that PermafrostNet's recommending for the publication of network data. One is to get it into a stable data repository. Examples of these include Polar Data Catalog, Nordic Canada D. These are stable places to keep your data, so that you don't have to worry that network may be out of funding for 5 years, but your published data will still be existing. You can get a DOI that will help you get citations, provide long-term storage. And then PermafrostNet will offer sort of a value-added service. So once your data are stored in a stable location, you can upload this copy to the PermafrostNet server, and it will make it accessible, kind of machine readable, so more interoperable, accessible in web maps. And if there are other sort of interests that you have in how that data should be accessed, we can support that as well. We do have a data server running at this data.permafrostnet.ca/Wrapup. And at the moment, we're sort of testing it out with the NTGS open reports. There's been not a whole lot of new published data out of the network because of the challenges in fieldwork this summer, but I encourage you to get in touch to you know, if you have data that you're interested in sharing. It's easy to add it to the system, and it will be used by the network and others. Briefly, this is just a quick schematic of the PermafrostNet data ecosystem. So you have, you know, data long-term storage in some stable repository, a number of databases. The icons in transparent colors are things that are planned but don't yet exist. And you can see on the right-hand side here, these are designed to be interfaces with which the data generated and hosted by PermafrostNet can interact and interoperate with other data systems across Canada. So I've been organizing sort of monthly conversations with the Permafrost Information Network at the GSC, the Yukon and Northwest Territories Geological Surveys. WMO's here, but we haven't invited them. But to talk about, you know, how this interaction between the different data sources can take place, and, you know, make the data more accessible to people across Canada who are interested in it. Starting to cut into the time here for breakouts, I see. Before I go too much into detail on breakouts, I just want to remind any network HQP that through a grant from Compute Canada, we have quite a lot of compute resources. So if you have any data processing, modeling, data storage needs that are important to your project, that there are resources to support that. And if you have any questions, you can go to the PermafrostNet data website or email me. Now, I understand it's been a bit of a whirlwind tour of some of the tools and services that I've been working on to support the various themes and permafrost data in Canada. But I'd like to try and get a bit of a two-way discussion going. And so as Michelle mentioned, I'm hoping that you can, within themes or in the kind of a general group, think about some of the things that have been presented as follow-ups to the data workshop, and think a little bit about within your theme, how can these resources help you? What changes or additions, to what's been mentioned is, would make these resources more useful for you? And what's missing altogether? What haven't I touched on that actually is very important for your research or your work in terms of accessing permafrost data or using it, whether you're in the network or not. As Michelle said, there's 5 themes plus a general group. So if you haven't renamed yourself, please do so now. And there's a Google sheet here. The link is at the top. In a few minutes, we'll move into breakout groups. We do have note takers for each of the themes, but don't feel shy about writing on the Google Doc if you'd rather write than speak, because in large breakout groups, it can be hard to get the words in all the time. So if you want to just jot down some notes yourself on the Google sheet, please don't hesitate to do so. And once the breakout groups have concluded, we'll come back here, and if there's time, we'll have a quick Q&A, and I'll be available after the conclusion of the workshop today. My understanding is there's a little social section, and I'm happy to talk about any of this. And maybe without further ado, we'll get into the breakout groups. Okay, well, I guess we'll just wrap up here. We don't have a whole lot of time. I think this session ends at 4:25. So thanks, everyone. I saw that themes 5 and 1 in particular were really gung-ho on the notes. Thanks for that. If there's a very short amount of time for questions. If someone has a question or a comment that they think would benefit from a group discussion. Otherwise, please do keep in mind the data rideshare board to try and connect those themes together. And I will be happy to field any questions or chat after the end of the sessions today.
Sorry, Nick, can I interrupt? Just ask, what is it you want us to do now? So we had a conversation in theme 2, but we haven't communicated it back to anybody yet. So what do you want us to do about that?
Oh, sure. I guess most effective.
Can we put the link? Sorry, Nick, can we put the link in the chat for everybody that has more to say?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It looks like the chat person's done that. Tony, if you have any notes from the conversation, just put those in the Google Doc, and I'll kind of collect those and try and use that to guide the next few months going forward. And then for the data rideshare connections, for that, just if you have data that you think would be valuable to other people in the network, or if there's something that you need in particular, post it up there, and we'll clean it up a bit and then send it back once we're done kind of wrapping things up for the AGM.
Thanks, Nick. So for anybody that needs a link to the mural board or to that document, if you open up chat and just scroll, it should be some of the last links that are provided. We hope that you contribute to those. I also wanted to just say thanks to everybody that participated today, that presented today.